The Shadow in the Snow. Chapter 1. It wasn't the loud bang that sent an electric shiver of fear tingling down Jodie's spine. That was just Ryan being careless and knocking the art display board into the bookshelf as he ran for the door. It wasn't the yell of fright from the other side of the classroom that set Jodie's teeth on edge either. That was Maya discovering the giant hairy spider that scuttled into her pencil case just before the home time bell rang. It wasn't even the sound of car horns honking outside the school gates that sent her mind spinning back to that terrible day 9 months ago when her world had turned upside down. No, what made Jodie think of the accident was the keyring dangling from her best friend's school bag. Former best friend, Jodie thought sadly. She'd barely talked to Lynn since the day it had happened. It wasn't Lynn's fault they'd drifted apart. Lynn had done her best to encourage Jodie to speak to her in school and join in with the playtime games. She visited her house to check on her and texted Jodie lots of times to ask her how she was doing. But Jodie had stayed in her room, asking her mother to tell Lynn she wasn't well when she visited, and she ignored all of Lynn's texts. She just couldn't bear to be around other people. Other people wanted to talk about Caitlin and what had happened to her. Jodie wanted to pretend that it hadn't happened. If she tried hard enough to act as though Caitlin was still here, then maybe, just maybe, when she came home from school, she'd find it was all just a bad dream. Caitlin would meet her at the farm gate, breathless with excitement about something that had happened in her high school class that day. Maybe she'd been given a trombone solo to play in her school concert. Maybe she'd got full marks again in the maths test she studied so hard for. Or maybe a boy she liked had said hello to her in the canteen, and Caitlin had run all the way home to tell her little sister about it. Most likely, though, it would be her riding lessons that Caitlin wanted to talk about. The riding lessons she loved more than anything. The riding lessons that had led to the yell, the bang and the loud honking of the car horn that troubled Jodie's dream and woke her in the middle of the night in a cold sweat. You weren't even there when it happened, Jodie thought to herself as she tidied her desk and put her homework book into her school bag. You were at your trumpet lesson. You don't know for sure if there was a yell or a bang or a car horn honking. All Jodie knew was that one of the farmhands had come to pick her up from her music lesson instead of her mother. His face had been pale, his lips drawn tight, as though every nerve in his body were tensed. Almost as if he was trying to hold himself together. It wasn't until Jodie got home and found the police officer sitting with her parents that she was told the terrible news. Jodie zipped her school bag up with a hard jerk, trying to force the thoughts from her head. She glanced around the classroom, looking for something to do that would keep her busy for the 10 minutes it would take the crowd of pupils and parents around the school gates to leave for home so that she could slip out unnoticed. But before she could find something to tidy, her eyes came to rest again on the keyring dangling from Lynn's school bag. It was in the shape of a horse, the same type of white horse Caitlin had been riding along the lane when the accident happened. "And I can't wait for the show jumping competition," Lynn was saying to her other two friends, Ali and Debs. "It's a week on Saturday, the day before my 11th birthday party. You will come, both of you, won't you?" "To the show jumping competition, or to your birthday party?" Ali asked. Let's see. Do I want to spend my whole Saturday watching you fall out of your saddle every time you come up to a jump higher than a blade of grass? Then have to pretend all Sunday that you're really a gold medal winning pro just 'cause it's your birthday? Nope, think I'll be busy both days." "Ugh, you're such a pain in the neck," Lynn laughed, giving him a playful poke in the arm. "But you will come to the show jumping, won't you?" "Course I'll come, Lynn," Ali grinned. "When have me and Debs ever missed any of your shows?" Jodie looked away quickly, her stomach knotting with guilt. Lynn had tried so hard to stay friends with her, but Jodie hadn't replied to any of her messages, never mind going to any of her shows in the past year. Riding was everything to Lynn, the same as it had been for Caitlin. Jodie knew Lynn was hurt that she didn't chat to her anymore and didn't come to cheer her on in the competitions that meant so much to her. If Jodie could just talk to her and explain why she couldn't bear to be around horses and show jumping and all the things that reminded her of Caitlin, then she knew Lynn would understand. But that would mean admitting out loud that the accident had really happened. That would mean accepting that Caitlin really was gone. There was no way Jodie could do that. "What are you all still doing in here?" the teacher asked in surprise when he came back to the classroom and found it wasn't empty. "The bell rang over 10 minutes ago. Off you go home. The sun goes down so early at this time of year. I don't want you walking back in the dark and the cold." He glanced out of the window as Lynn, Ali and Debs hurried into the hall to fetch their coats from the rack on the wall. The February sky was misty, grey, snow lying thick on the fields surrounding the playground. It made Jodie shiver just looking at it, but the thought of walking home in the cold wasn't what stopped her from fetching her own coat. Lynn's school bag was still sitting on her desk, the horse keyring dangling from it. Jodie's eyes darted back to it. She knew what she had to do, and it was worse than anything she'd ever done before. "Jodie, would you like me to walk you to the gate?" her teacher offered, seeing her hesitating at her own desk. "No thanks, Mr. Foster," she said quickly. "I'm just going to wash out the glue pot my group was using this afternoon, and then I'll go straight home." Mr. Foster looked like he was about to say something, and then he glanced out of the window again and bit his lip. He could see there were still some pupils at the school gates and some parents standing chatting by the fence. He knew Jodie wasn't ready to face big crowds or talk to anyone yet. Jodie was grateful that he hadn't pushed her to be around other people before she was ready. "All right," he said, nodding, "but just 5 minutes, okay? I have to speak to the head teacher about something just now, but if you're still here when I get back, then I'll have to walk you to the gate and see you across the road. The school crossing officer can't wait around forever in this cold." "Thanks, Mr. Foster," Jodie said, heading to the sink with her glue pot. Her mother used to come and pick her up from school, but that was before baby Emma had been born 7 months ago. It wasn't just the accident that had changed everything at home. When Mr. Foster closed the door behind him, Jodie set the pot down by the side of the sink and raced over to Lynn's desk. She'd have to be quick or she'd get caught. Her hands were shaking so much that they slipped on the clip of the keyring, the end of the metal digging painfully into her skin. There were so many colourful charms and toys attached to Lynn's school bag that it was hard to get the horse off. Luckily, that meant Lynn wouldn't notice it had gone missing. Not until it was too late. Jodie felt her heart beating faster as she hid the horse keyring at the bottom of her own school bag and raced back to the sink again before the others returned. She knew what she was doing wasn't right. She knew that without her favourite lucky charm, Lynn wouldn't want to enter the show jumping competition next weekend. Lynn had treasured the charm ever since her grandmother had given it to her on her 4th birthday. She took it to every riding lesson and competition and said she couldn't win without it. And that was why Jodie was taking it. She didn't want Lynn to win the competition. The door opened again, and the 3 friends came back in, talking excitedly about what they were going to do in the coming holiday week. Jodie held her breath as she heard them pick up their school bags and head out. "Please don't notice it's gone," she thought to herself. "Please don't notice." "Jodie?" Lynn stopped at the door and called over to her. Jodie turned around reluctantly, knots of guilt tightening painfully in her stomach. "Jodie, if you're free one day in the holidays, maybe we could meet up," Lynn said. "You could come over to mine, or I could come to yours if it's easier." Her face was hopeful, not accusing. Jodie's shoulders slumped in relief. She hadn't noticed the missing keyring. Not yet. "Maybe," she mumbled back so quietly she wasn't sure if Lynn could hear. Lynn could see Jodie shrugged her shoulders though, and that was enough to let her know Jodie wasn't interested. "Okay, well, see you tomorrow," Lynn said awkwardly, hurrying away to catch up with her other friends. When Jodie had the classroom to herself again, she heaved a long sigh of relief. Washing out the glue pot quickly, she tried hard to ignore the guilt pricking at her when she thought of the keyring sitting at the bottom of her school bag. "I had to do it," she told herself. If Lynn wins that show jumping competition next week, then she'll bring the rosette to school after the holidays and the teacher will pin it to the display board. Jodie glanced over at the bright pictures and the photos on the board above the craft table. It was right opposite her desk. She'd have to stare at it every day for the rest of term. The rosette, a reminder of her sister every time she saw it. Caitlin had been brilliant at riding. Her bedroom wall was covered with rosettes she'd won over the years. Jodie might have been able to keep Caitlin's bedroom door closed at home to stop the memories of her sister tumbling out, but she couldn't take Lynn's rosette off the display board once it was pinned up. Everyone would notice. Everyone would ask her why she'd done it. Then she'd have to talk about Caitlin and how everything to do with horses reminded her of her sister and her riding accident. And the last thing Jodie ever wanted to do was admit to the whole world that her sister was gone. And that was the first chapter of The Shadow in the Snow. For the full story, visit the Twinkl website. Thanks for watching and listening.